I am so glad, I'm so blessed to have our attorney, Debbie Baker, with us. Good morning, attorney.
Hey, kiddo, attorney. It sounds so official. It's just like, wow.
But you are, I mean, listen, you worked hard for that title.
Yes, I did. And it still is weird since I've never been really involved in titles. So, but anyway,
I
yeah.
understand. You know what? Your life before an attorney was really amazing also. Tell people about your life before being an attorney and now as an attorney.
Okay. Well, uh,
My
so
coach.
before BA, before attorney, BA, um, I I was a coach. I was a life coach, for one of a better description. I did that for about 30 years, asking people difficult questions, um, couldn't give a wrong answer, helping them make difficult choices and decisions. I couldn't, again, you really couldn't give a wrong answer. All with the idea of being of service and helping people get what they say they wanted out of life. Um, it was fun. I got to confront, not confrontational, but confront a lot of people who said, "Gee, I value my family most, and I'm working 110 hours a week." And I said, "Well, help me understand how that works." "Well, I'm doing it because whatever." And I said, "Have you asked them if that's what they want?" And nobody ever said yes. It was just an assumption. And I think probably now there are more women fall into that category than did before, but generally it was men who had the idea that that was their role. Um, so it was lots of fun. Um, help people change careers, which was interesting because they would be paid by their current employer for them to now leave their current employer and change careers. Oh well. Um,
Yeah.
and
Debbie, what does a life coach do?
a life coach. I mean, and I don't like the expression, but a life coach is the one where somebody comes and says, "I'm in a career and it pays me a lot of money and I'm not happy."
Ah,
Okay, so why do you stay? Because it pays me a lot of money. I said, "Well, that wasn't really what I asked you." And then, or they say that, and I said, "Well, have you told the person you work for that you're unhappy?" "No, I can't do that because they'll fire me." I said, "Well, you don't know that, and you're not performing." Um, but two of my favorite clients, I was hired by their manager because both of their jobs were in jeopardy, and for non-performance. And I said, "You understand my loyalty is to them, not to you." And he said, "That's fine because both of their jobs are in jeopardy. So if you could help them perform," and these were people he valued, they weren't new employees, whatever. If you can help them either choose to be here and do the job or whatever. And so one of them, I think she stayed and she started performing. The other one had accepted a job as a manager because she was so honored by this person having asked her. And this person is wonderful. He's a really, really good man. And I said, "Well, don't you think you need to tell him you're unhappy?" And he said, "Well, I don't want to disappoint him," and all the normal things. And we did a couple of assessments about how mismatched she was for her job. And she called him and she told him. And she stepped down from being a manager in her organization to being a support person in a different role, which she had loved. And I sent her flowers because it took a lot of courage for her to call. And so that kind of thing, people who just get that they can choose to stay where they are in the world of making a lot of money and they have to stop complaining about it. "Well, what do you mean?" I said, "If you're going to choose to be there, then that's okay. I mean, that's fine." And I had one client who kept a job that he really didn't like because he had a son who needed surgery, a young son who needed heart surgery multiple times, and he couldn't afford to go out on his own. And it was long before he could get something that precluded pre-existing conditions. So he stayed where he was to get his son through all the surgery, which made all the sense in the world, but then he stopped bemoaning it because he was very clear about why he was there. Or another one where we coached her to stay long enough in her role to get her next bonus and then resign. But she was unhappy. I said, "Well, choose a time when you're going to leave." So she chose whatever her next bonus was, and so those were like, and they were so much fun because you'd ask a person a question, they'd say, "I don't know," and I'd say, "Well, if you did know, what would be the answer?" And most of the time, you know the answer. You just don't want to say it out loud. So that was always a fun question to ask. If you did know, what would be the answer? All right, good. All right. So yeah. So that's with the coaching, and then since after now attorney, I don't get to ask the same kind of questions um, because the attorney role is much more counseling than even asking a really difficult question. And I get to ask, well, do you really want to appoint this person to represent you um, when you've effectively disowned them? I mean, are you really going to trust them with your money when you've effectively disowned them? Well, they're my child, or they're my husband, or my brother. I know, I understand that, but you just want to think about it. So there's still a lot of it around. And the coaching, I have one coaching client now. And in order to hire a coach, you have to be coachable, and he's very coachable. So, and one of the worst promises I ever made to somebody ever was that I'd be coachable because it's really annoying. It can be really annoying. But yeah, so that's what I did for all those years
But
before God sent me to law school.
you really have to care about people to as a coach. But now that you're an estate planning attorney, you really have to care about people.
Yeah, and the thing I'm learning, if I could just came up in a conversation today with my mentor, um, is sometimes you can care too much. Um, so I've got a couple of probate cases where families at war, um, and I just want to make peace, and that would be like, let's say I was representing you in a probate of your brother's estate, let's just say, but he had passed, unfortunately, after he made you get an estate plan when you were 27. But he had passed, and you had other siblings who were arguing about they didn't trust you to distribute whatever the proceeds were going to be of the estate. And I spoke to the brothers, and I attempted to come to an accommodation. And this morning, my mentor said, "Deborah, you represent Steve. In this imaginary case, you don't represent those other people." And I said, "But I'm just trying to prevent more family dissension." And I think her counsel is good. I'm just not sure I'm not too embroiled already to follow it. And it'll be a great one for the next time. Um, so the law is very interesting, in that it's really a really an interesting practice in dividing the personal level of compassion for all concerned versus the protection, so to speak, of the one. And this isn't the first time a situation like this is the first time this situation has shown up, but it's not the first time I've been in a situation where I thought, "Oh, wow, you know, holy mackerel, I'm in the middle of a family war that I could have avoided by just a strict constructionist view of kind of what my role was." But yeah, so anyway, so yeah, there's still a lot of counseling around, coaching around.
Let me ask you, why do families need to have an estate plan?
Well, you never know what's going to happen. For one, um, they need a plan to save their families, the people they love, grief after they pass, whether it's an expected passing or an unexpected passing. um, because there's no it's so easy to say, using you and Sophia. You say, "My whole family knows that everything I own goes to Sophia." They all know. However, you've never done anything legally to put the it would be like borrowing money from a family member and not having it in writing that there's a debt because no who's gonna know. So you say everything goes to Sophia, and if Sophia predeceases me, everything goes to these 3 animal shelters or these 3 organizations. Everybody knows it. Everybody in your world knows it, except there's nothing in writing. So what happens is then everything you own is up in a probate situation you didn't want just because you didn't want anybody to have to spend money settling your estate. And it's going to take time and money to get it sorted out. And Sophia may or may not get anything because whoever is legally entitled to those proceeds decide that it's really great that you lived together for 30 years and she was the love of your life and you wanted her to have everything, but they didn't have any legal obligation. So you do it to save grief later. You do it to protect the people you love from possibly being in an argument with other people. Um, Beneficiary designations supersede anything you have in a will. So if you've left something to somebody with a beneficiary designation on a life insurance policy or a payable on death on a bank account, and somebody comes along and says, well, that's my money, it's not your money because the financial institution has to pay the beneficiary. And you have the conversations with the attorneys to at least inform you of what might happen if you don't do the plan. And then you go and make a more informed decision. Like somebody yesterday said, she's got one child. We're doing a trust. She's outlined all the distribution channels, and there was one thing she said, I'm not going to worry about that now. If it comes up later, we'll handle it. Well, at least we had a conversation about it. So not I'm not in the clear so much legally, but my conscience is like we talked about it, and you decided, which was a reasonable decision, not to do anything now, and we'll talk about it later. Um, but people do estate planning because they love their families enough to not want to leave them in a situation where they even have to talk to an attorney. Had a client who we did her planning last minute. She died. Her daughter called me the day she died and said, what do I need to do? I said, you need to grieve. You just need to grieve. Nothing's going to change in the next 6 months. If I don't hear from you in 6 months, I'll call to see how you are. But we took care of everything you need to take care of. And now, whenever you get a death certificate, you can do whatever you need to do with that. But even that's not important because nothing's going to change in the next 6 months. And that to me is similar to the life insurance agent who talked to you and said, you really need to get some life insurance on yourself because your income is substantially higher than Sophia, and you know she's going to grieve your loss, but you don't want her style of living to suffer um, while she's adjusting. And his greatest joy is being in a position to deliver that check to her. So he knows he did his part to save her some grief after you pass. And the estate planning is very similar. Does that answer your question?
Deb yeah, Debbie, God, you just reminded me of something. I had a very, very famous person who owed me money, who died suddenly. And first of all, it was very difficult having to call the wife because we knew it, him and I knew it, but no one else did. And it was very difficult calling the wife, saying, your husband owes me money. and not having anything in writing, and it was very, very difficult. So you're right when people, that they don't make others aware as to estate planning, it really causes a lot of problems. What are some of the components of a good estate plan?
Um, well, I've learned, well, the basic components are a last will and testament, which just talks about how you're going to dispose of your bounty, your your possessions, your life after you pass. And we've talked many times that an 18-year-old at 1 second after midnight needs their own. And that's because horrible things happen and young people die, accidents, illnesses, who knows? Um, you need a durable power of attorney so somebody can make financial decisions for you if need be, pay bills if need be. There are still people who write checks, but having access to a bank account or your digital assets online, passwords and stuff like that. So those things can happen. Not everybody's in a situation where there's they have a significant other or a best friend who's financially able to do it. So without a power of attorney, you would have given Joe the right to do it had you known, but you didn't, and now Joe is busy paying funeral expenses, or he's whatever it is. So power of attorney, whatever. You need a healthcare surrogate, so you name somebody who can make health decisions for you if you're not able. You had a bad car accident and somebody's going to decide to do surgery and you're not able to give permission. Um, and you need a living will so that you outline, okay, when the end is near, when people have decided there's really no reasonable medical probability of recovery. And I spoke to somebody yesterday where 6 weeks ago, that's what his doctors would have said, and he's made this miraculous recovery. So there's no telling, but there's no reasonable medical probability of recovery. You've given somebody the right to either pull the plug or keep the plug in, for extremes. Those are the basics. Um, if you've got minor children, the basic is appointing a permanent guardian for your children. If you and their other parent deceased, who's going to raise them? Um, Not the person who looks good on paper, but the person you would choose. Your hippie sister and her husband versus your very put together sister-in-law and your brother who look great on paper, but you wouldn't trust them with a living being, including Sophia's cats. So those are the basics. Those four documents are basics. So yeah.
It's amazing every time we do our show, you bring up something that I never even would have thought of. And I think that's why your job as an attorney is so important because the layman like myself, there's so many things I wouldn't even think about that you actually bring to the attention. What about Debbie, what does an executor do?
So an executor, in Florida, they're called personal representatives. In other states, they're called executors. The executor of the estate is the one a person's appointed to settle the affairs of the estate. Could be just distributing all your tangible personal property. So all the cat statuettes that Sophia has because you've told her no more living animals for a while, but you can buy as many figurines, mugs, placards, and anything you want, cat, you can have in the house. Just we're not getting another live one now. So that's the person who would you would task with dispensing with all those things. The personal representative executor is the one if for some reason you had to go to probate for whatever reason. There was a terrible accident and there was a malpractice medical suit. They would be the one you've already named. There was nothing else, but there was that. That would be the one you would have named to already be in charge of handling the legal piece of collecting the legal settlement. Um, when a plan is done correctly and there's no tragic ending, I recommend for tangible stuff that you give away everything you can before you pass, then I can enjoy it and be poignant about it after you pass or whatever, and nobody can argue about it. If everything is done correctly, that executor will never have to be officially appointed by the court. You'll have you'll have made provision for one, and you've done everything else the way it needs to be done so that they're needed. But that's the executor or the personal representative, the person you assign to settle your estate after your pass. And it only comes into play after you pass. It's of no value, has no standing, has no nobody can claim and say, well, I'm Steve's executor. I thought it was really great, but Steve's living. I mean, last time I looked, right, I saw him yesterday and he was living and breathing. And I haven't gotten an email from Sophia saying, hey, cancel all further calls. No, it's not. So there's right now, there's nothing you can do legally, whatever. Obviously, on
You
this
know,
point,
Debbie,
because I
I think all attorneys have knowledge. You went to school, but there's something you cannot learn in school, a quality which I think you have, is you make people feel so comfortable and the way you explain things. And I think that that is so important. You know, when someone's looking to retain an attorney for their for estate planning, I just it just puts you right there at the top. You've got a big heart, which I think is so important when it comes to estate planning. And I'm just going to turn it around on you. We've got a few minutes left. Why should I hire your firm to handle my estate planning?
um, well, a part of what you said, I am very compassionate and work hard at people understanding. Um, I would say all all attorneys are hired based upon the personality match. So if you're looking for somebody who's going to speak to you in plain language and do their very best to stay away from legal jargon and whatever, and apologize when they fall into it, like assuming you know what an executor is. I mean, that's a great example, right? Um,
Yes.
if you're going to look for somebody who has a really good sense of humor and in the hardest of times believes that there's something you can smile about, even if you can't laugh. Um, I think I'm really good at that. Um, if you're, if you're looking for somebody, you're okay. So the supreme compliment with any professional in whatever field is that the people they work with call them about things that are totally unrelated to what they help them with, because they become the like trusted advisor. No, you acknowledge me for something that is a gift from God that I didn't even know I had until it's a while, but that I create a safe space. For the most part, people feel really safe with me, and they'll tell me things they
Yes.
wouldn't tell. They tell me things they wouldn't tell anybody else. Now I'm really
Because they
nosy
know you care. They know
because
you
there's
really
things that I
care.
can, and I'm not going to share it with anybody. I'm not going to hang up and go, "Oh, you can't believe what Steve just told me." So, so I think it's not why you should hire me. It's why you after speaking to 3 people, you would hire me, is that I'm nice. I had one client tell me they hired me. They called me because I looked nice in my website photo. Okay. I had one client tell me that I really went overboard, and they could tell from the beginning that I was gonna go overboard. So the situation I described at the beginning where I may be too embroiled, I really look at going overboard so that people feel taken care of. And I'm always willing to admit I flubbed it. So if I gave you counsel today, like this thing this morning, and I learned tomorrow that it wasn't the best counsel for anybody, I'm going to call you and say, Steve, I know I said this yesterday. I'm going to take it back. I think we need to do this. Um, and the other thing I'm willing to do, which, I don't know,
You know, I'm
when
sorry that we've only got about 30 seconds. Give
okay, all
everybody
right.
your
My
phone
phone
number and
number
your
is eight. If
website.
you want the rest of the answer to that question, you want to call me at 813 586-1332, 813-586-1332, or send a text to Steve and say, ask her to finish that answer to that question next time you
And
see
she'll
her.
be back with us next month too. Debbie, thank you
Okay.
so much. We love you.
Thanks, Steve.
Have
I
a
really
blessed
appreciate it.
week.
Yeah,
Thank you.
we'll talk soon.